Hi, this is Wayne Hall back again with an indie comic you can order through your local shop, or at least you can order someplace, I think. And this week I'm going to talk about a book that's a little older, but it's significant to me because it has a name associated with it now that I think you would recognize, and that is this book. It's called Codebreakers. And the name that you would recognize is the guy that's now in charge of Boom Studios, a guy by the name of Ross Ritchie. That guy right there. He's the creator of this story, the tale that's going on. It's written by Kerry Malloy. Artist is Scott Godlewski. Coloring is by Stephen Downer. This was done back in 2010, so it's a little older of a book. And as such, the technology might seem a little different than it is today, 10 years later. But it's a really gripping story. Let me read the back of it to you. It's called Crack the Code Ciphers, Codes, Encryption, Passwords. They are the elite cryptanalysis unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, responsible for protecting America from those who wish to do it harm. Led by Donald Foster, they are the best of the best at getting to the truth and protecting information that could shatter the world. But what happens when one of their own goes missing? Is it the one code these codebreakers can't crack? In the thrilling genre of blockbusters like The Da Vinci Code and The Bourne Supremacy comes an action-packed espionage comic that will leave you asking for more. And that's the truth, I have to say. When this first came out, I was living in the Washington, D.C. area, and I was buying a lot of Boom Studios stuff at that point. I still do. There's a lot of good stuff that comes out from Boom Studios. And this book I was buying, and I got the first three issues. And as often happens to me, the store that I got the first three issues did not buy the fourth. I wish I could tell you how many times that's happened to me. But what happened was, of course, then I was desperate to get the conclusion because I really enjoyed the story. And I literally called every store I could in the greater Washington, D.C. area. Now, I lived in Maryland. I finally found a store in Virginia that had one copy of it. I begged them to hold on to it for me, and I took a day off from work so I could drive in the middle of the day when the traffic is the best. And I drove down to Virginia, and I got the fourth issue, and I was so grateful. I bought the collected edition, and some Boom for a long time was putting out these little smaller copies of it. The collected edition was a lot smaller, so I was doing that, and I keep this because it's a really significant book to me. Now, what's happening in this story is there's a code that nobody seems to be able to break. And there's a guy by the name of Stanley who's part of this group. And he is tasked with trying to break into that code. And as he's apparently just about to get it, suddenly the agency gets a picture that looks like it's this Stanley and he's on a bridge. And the next thing you see is he's apparently jumped off. Now, of course, I say the word apparently, and that tells you something. There's things going on with this. Now, normally I'm an action adventure type of guy. I want lots of punching and kicking and running and jumping and things like that. This is not that way of a story. There's a lot more suspense. And I like suspense in my stories. I like mystery. I like to wonder what's really going on. I like things that tell me that make me go down one way and then come back another. And this book really excels at that. It's going to lead you down the primrose path, and it's going to take you in an entirely different direction just when you think you've got it all figured out. I like that in a story. I like a story that outwits me, that makes me think it's going a certain direction and it doesn't. And that's what this one here. Now, saying that, you might read this book and you might say, "Oh well, if I think it's going to go this way, then it won't." But it's written so well that I think you're going to have to pay attention. But you might think you know what's going to happen. I didn't, at least. And I like that in a series that is particularly smart. And I so many comics I can go through in 5 minutes. This is not one of those. You're going to need to pay attention to it. Now, it's available on Comixology. If your store can't order it, it's through Boom. And these days, Boom seems to be pretty accessible. You can also order it on Amazon. So if your local store for some reason can't order it, and I still puzzle over exactly what's going on now with the pandemic going on. But this book I highly recommend, even though the technology may seem a little outdated, it's still a very, very strong book. It's still something that's going to get you to wonder what's happening. Can you trust your senses? Can you trust your idea as to how things are going to work? I couldn't. So, as such, it's a very brilliant script. I would love to see this be a movie. I've seen a lot of suspense stories that are kind of similar to it. Code breaking can be a little dull in comparison to, like, they mentioned the Bourne Supremacy, where there's lots and lots of action and punching and jumping and cars crashing into each other and stuff like that. You don't get a lot of that in here. Now, you do get some. Like with this one here, there's a fire going on at one point, and there's one of the Codebreakers is stuck in there. And so there's all kinds of things going on with that. I like that kind of stuff. I like drama as opposed to a lot of destruction and things like that. Now, of course, fire, there's going to be some destruction, but it's a really suspenseful story, one of the best that I've read. It's the thing that got me turned into these kinds of things. I really loved the way that it ledger domain and what's going on with that. I thought it was going to be terribly dull. I just bought a lot of Boom stuff at that time, but it's not dull. It's going to keep you on the edge of your seat. So, granted, yes, 10 years ago this was coming out, but I think you're going to learn a lot about code breaking and things like that as a result of it. So, let's get to the grading. The writing, I would give this a solid A to A+. It really is gripping in the way that it does. And like I said, it makes you think you know what's going on, and then you don't. So anything that can surprise me along those lines, I truly adore. And this is one of those main books. Like I said, I drove hours to try to find this book, the conclusion of it. The art, I would give this a good B. There's not a lot of super action stuff going on. There is suspense. You can see she's terrified right there. There's things happening that look good on there. It's a good artwork. It's not spectacular, so I would give it a good B. So it's strong, so I would give it that, but it's not dynamic in the pure sense of the word. Lettering, I'm always tough on, and again, there's a couple places where some stuff covers over things that I don't think it should. But I would give it a C, because I think the lettering's pretty good. Literary merit. Even though the 10 years have passed, because I reread it, and yes, the technology is a little older than what we know now, but it's still a very good story that I think we can still relate to where the technology is. It's not as advanced as it is right now, but I think we can relate to where it was at that point, and I think we can understand it. So literary merit, I would still give it a good A, because it's something that even now, 10 years later, it still works really well. Fun factor, I never like books with a lot of fun in them. Once in a while I do, but this one does not have a lot of fun in it. There's a little dark humor, very little. If you're looking for fun, not this book. It's a D as far as fun factor goes. Overall grade, I'd still give this book a good solid A-, because I think it's the kind of a book that can change your perspective on how these kinds of stories are told. Like I said, it could be dull. It's not. It's very, very smartly written. The characters are interesting. What happens to them kept my attention. And I just think that this is one of those books that can really surprise you on how gripping it is. So Codebreakers, a good A-. I would say if you like spy stuff, if you enjoy this kind of stuff, I highly recommend it for you, particularly if you haven't read it before. And until next time, keep reading your comics.